This is just some general climbing mentality stuff that was good for me personally. Um, I think there's a lot of sort of advice out there that just sort of parroted, and I'm hoping this is more original and that it's stuff that I've like improved on what's commonly accepted or I understand something better. So the most basic thing is just you have to expect to win. I mean, I think this is pretty sort of obvious, but like for me, the last time I was with Morg Sona with Morg, I expected that if I'm versus a playmaker, I could just shield their stuff, and if I'm versus an enchanter, I could just go Sona, and then yeah, and the key is that you have like a reason to expect to win. That you should say, okay, all else is equal. I'm going to win this game because you need to make a difference. Obviously, if you want to expect to climb, you have to expect that you do play better than everyone else in your game because, um, or at least you play better than everyone else at your elo because you are going to climb. And obviously, again, this is just very obvious, but it sort of underlies everything with climbing. And so I think something that's very sort of insidious is the idea of a coin flip that it's just a 50-50 thing where you get lucky or you get unlucky and that's what decides the game. And it's an insidious idea because there is a lot of luck in the short term, right? You're just one player in a game with 10 players. Other people sometimes play really well or really poorly, and that luck is just always going to be there. But the problem is, people go from that to thinking, okay, everything is totally luck. And that's also very tempting when you lose because you can ascribe it to luck rather than it being your own fault. But again, I think you have to remember that you do make a difference, that you do have sort of like agency in your own games and in your own rank, um, especially in the long term, right? Over a few hundred games, you're definitely going to get to your deserved rank. Um, and you have to just think about it uh, in terms of a lot of games rather than just this individual game in which it's very true. You don't have complete agency in individual games. Like you can any player you want, the best player in the world still loses individual games, but you do have agency after a decent over a decent number of games in that it does depend on how you play. um, so I think that's important to remember and make that distinction because the worst thing to do is to stop believing that you do make a difference in your games. Um, and then I think probably the most important thing for me is after losses saying, okay, I should have won this game. If I had done, this and this differently, we could have won, but I just didn't, so we lost. Or even after games where I felt like I deserved to lose, but my team kind of carried me, like and played like they sort of overperformed to compensate for me underperforming. To say, okay, well, I should have actually won this game by like playing well, but I didn't. But like next time I will is the important thing. That after you lose, you say, okay, well, even though I lost this game, I'm sort of going to consider it a win because I know that if I had, shielded this or hit this snare, which I should have hit, or been in this place at this time, whatever it was, that if I did this, we would have won. Then I can consider this a win, and that the next time I'm in this situation is um, the next time I'm in this game, I'll do the right play and win the game. And if you don't have this mentality, then the next time you're in the same game, you lose. Whereas if you do, then the next time you don't make the mistake again and you win. And you have to really believe it because I think it's um, one thing to say, okay, I'm going to focus on my own mistakes or whatever, but it's another thing to actually like really believe that um, you are responsible for things. Because again, it's tempting to just sort of shift the blame to like, okay, whatever happened just happened. Um, and I think the sort of opposite mentality is like, okay, well, whatever happened, like I made a mistake, sure, but we would have lost anyways. Like it just happened, and just sort of complain that, okay, maybe I didn't play perfectly, but I played fine, and even if I didn't play fine, like my teammates were so bad that it didn't matter. But I think it's really hard to, you're not really a sort of unbiased judge of what lost your team the game. And it is so tempting to just say, okay, well, these teammates, just unlucky. I got bad teammates. Like, what can you do? Nothing. Um, but you have to just have the mentality of like, well, as long as I made a mistake that I shouldn't have made, I really can't complain about teammates or anything. And so I'm gonna say, okay, well, and obviously it's not like every game you have to say, okay, I could have won this game. There are real unwinnable games, and it is sort of hard to tell the unwinnable games from the winnable games. But in the games where you did make a mistake, that this was a mistake you could have won otherwise, you really have to say, okay, I'm going to consider this like if I do this differently, it's a win. So I really should have won this game, and a game with like these players in it, I really should win, so that the next time you actually do win it. And then the last thing is autopilot, because I think it's sort of commonly thought that autopilot is a bad thing, but I really think it's a necessary thing that you can't not autopilot. There's just too much going on in the game to not automatically do like the vast majority of it, of like every decision or click you make, um, that it just has to be sort of thoughtless. Um, and if you were to, you know, dissect a sort of mistake in a game, you say, "Wow, this guy's a pro player. What? How did he make such a silly mistake? Um, how did he fail his flash or whatever?" But when you look at what's going on in games, there's like so much stuff going on that it's not that any individual thing is that hard or complicated, but there's just so much going on that you do have to do a lot of it with very little or no conscious thought. So you do need to autopilot for, I think, most things in the game. And so because you can't remove it, I think you have to like improve it, right? You can't just do away with habit altogether. You have to just improve your habits. And so I think that really comes more in reflection on the games, like I was saying earlier, where you have to be reflecting on your mistakes and saying, okay, if I had done this differently, I would have won. And then so the next game you go into it, you think, okay, I'm not going to make that same mistake again. And eventually you internalize that and it just becomes a good habit, and you stop having to think about it and like deliberately, consciously say, okay, I'm going to do this, because you just automatically do it. And so I think it really is more about improving your autopilot than like doing away with it entirely again, because you just have to have habits. There's too much going on to not have them. So it really does become about sort of actively improving your habits, but passively using them in game.